Welcome to Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails. Today is the 17th of November, and I'm getting ready to wrap up my rut lull break. And I needed to get back to the office and get some stuff done here, pay the bills and that sort of fun stuff. But I didn't want to do it during the peak times when the bucks were cruising more and the rut was more active. So I picked the middle of November. And we've talked about the fact that there is a little bit of a dead time in there. If you don't have a hot doe within close range of your tree stand, you're probably not going to see much for bucks. So on the rest of this episode, we're going to talk about what the week ahead looks like, the second half of the rut, and how we're going to hunt it. Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails is brought to you by Redneck Blinds, Code of Silence Apparel, Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail App, Whitetail Institute, research equals results. B3 releases, XO broadheads, exact sights, Muddy Outdoors tree stands, Stealth Cam trail cameras, and Hoyt.
I actually have a couple questions about that.
Okay.
That I thought of as I was editing last week's episode. I was making a couple of graphs about buck activity relative to like estrus levels.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, does after the estrus levels peak and then drop off? Obviously, they don't peak back up.
Well, they actually do peak back up a little bit in a month, but we can talk about that later.
Okay. But the buck activity at the November 7th, peak buck activity dropping off, how high does it peak again on the back end of that?
And I think that's what this episode is really all about, is trying to figure out how good the second half of the rut is compared to the first half.
Yeah.
And I don't know as a percentage wise where it would be, but I do think that the mature bucks tend to move maybe a little bit more without a doe after the peak of estrus than what the younger bucks do. It just seems like the younger bucks get burned out during the rut, and they're cruising all over the place, covering. Gosh, I got trail camera pictures from those stealth cameras. You're going to get a kick out of this, Jordan. Remember that one really nice 3-year-old, the great big one with all the sticker points? He was a huge 2-year-old last year that we were so proud of.
Yeah.
I had him in one day on the stealth cameras because they're cell cameras, so I'm getting pictures of him so I can look at him the next day. He was on one corner of the farm, and then that same day he was on another corner. Then the same day, there wasn't daytime, only one daytime picture, but the same night he was on the other far corner. So he covered, at least 4 miles as the crow flies during that 24-hour period. And that's kind of typical of what these younger bucks do. You don't see that with the older bucks. I wish we did, because they'd be a lot easier to kill. But they find a doe and they hole up with that doe, and then they either steal another doe from a different buck as soon as they get done breeding the first one, or they just kind of hang out. They know where to go. They've been through the program a few times. Whereas these young ones, they expend all that energy. Well, then they just don't participate much in the second part of the rut because they're all worn out. So usually what you'll see then after, let's just say roughly for the sake of argument, the 20th to the 22nd is when the buck movement of the older, more mature bucks that don't have a doe with them anymore starts to ramp back up again. And that's kind of what I'm keying toward now, because I didn't kill anything, during the first part of the season. So I'm relying kind of heavily on plan B, which is the tail end of this rut. So anyway, to answer your question, you don't get as much overall buck movement, but the odds of seeing a mature buck are probably a little bit higher on the back end of the breeding cycle than on the front end.
I gotcha.
The first hot doe kind of gets everybody going, but after that, the mature bucks, they don't have to try too hard to find the next doe.
Right.
Because they can always steal her from another buck.
Right.
But then as you get towards the end, where there aren't very many does in estrus anymore, he doesn't have that benefit of time on his side where he can just hang out and another doe will come into estrus, because now the numbers are declining.
So he has to move a little bit more.
He works harder.
And he's not as burnt out as the younger bucks.
Right.
That makes sense.
And he understands the program better. He's been through it a few times.
It's not his first rodeo.
It's not his first rut cycle. There was a study done in Texas, and I can't remember who did it. I'm thinking maybe it was Mickey Hellickson, but gosh, I don't want to give him credit for it if that's wrong. But granted, Texas isn't Iowa, nor is it the Midwest, but if you compare rut phase to rut phase and don't worry about the actual dates, it has a really cool correlation. He found that going into the rut, the overall response of bucks to rattling was at its peak as the rut was starting to ramp up. But then what he found was that the number of mature bucks that responded to rattling actually went up after the majority of the does had been bred. So he kind of did another take on that same sort of mindset or the thought pattern that the more mature bucks are going to be maybe a little bit more vulnerable after most of the does are bred. So that's coming up in the next few days. So I'm not going to be here at the home office much longer. I'll be back at the farm and trying to take advantage of the plan B or the second round. And I've got a lot of friends who didn't fill tags.
Yeah, I feel like everyone I've talked to, it's been kind of slow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I mean, I know people obviously who did fill tags, but gosh, a lot of people who are traditional, early November buck killers, they're still sitting on their tags.
And again, it was warm. I don't know, you said it, I mean, the rut's still gonna rut. Like, it shouldn't.
You just get probably more daylight activity when it's colder.
I got you.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a lot of us that are kind of banking on this back end of November. So how do you hunt that? I mean, obviously this is something we could leave for the Whitetail Watch episode on Wednesday, but I kind of want to cover it now because it has to do with my plans for hunting this, the buck that we call the Jordan buck.
Mm-hmm. The Bill buck.
We renamed it.
I think that it's funny. It's a funny play on words. Bill, buck, haha, like dollar bill, just a buck.
Kind of some cute irony there, right?
Thanks.
Is that what they call
I've been
that?
thinking about that. I've been wanting to tell that for a while.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll be here all week.
Yeah. Maybe not. You're gonna have to do better. You're gonna get that hook that comes from off the stage.
The tomatoes thrown. Okay, how are you gonna hunt the Bill buck?
Okay, so that deer, he's been showing up just often enough now. I think he's shown up 4 times since Halloween, or since the 30th of October, and he's showing up more or less where he was at last year. So I've got a sense probably of maybe what he's doing and where he's living and how he's living. And I hunted him as hard as I could without taking too much risk on the first part of the rut and just never saw him. I think we came really close on the 6th of November. I'm pretty sure he was the one that had the doe holed up right below our tree stand that was down there with her all day long. How do you go about hunting the backside of the primary rut? What I've seen over the years, if you wait long enough, like from the 28th of November on, they get really, I won't say easy to kill, but more predictable on food. So if you want to say, okay, I'm just going to hold up a little bit, kind of play it safe for a while, and then get into the best food source in the area where the buck that I'm trying to kill is living, he's probably going to show up there in the evening. Maybe, hopefully before dark, but he's going to go to food. I've just seen it over and over, and I've killed a number of nice bucks that way, just catching them coming back to food again towards the end of November. And it's just like clockwork. It doesn't even have to be super cold. What is today, 50 degrees? Is it, do you think? She's going to look.
54.
54. This is cold enough. They'll be coming to food, at the tail end of the rut, even on days like this. You combine a little bit of cold, and that makes them probably even a little bit more vulnerable. But that's not necessarily the only way to hunt him, nor is it the way that I'll probably be able to hunt this buck, because where he's likely to be feeding is really, really hard to access.
Where is it?
By the open gate. Getting in is not super hard because you can come in across that open cornfield. But then at the end of legal shooting time, trying to get out of there without spooking stuff is going to be a nightmare. You've got to be able to figure out how to get out of there at the end of legal shooting time, and that spot doesn't lend itself well where he's living. The other option is down by the scrape tree, and that's all beans down there, and I think that's going to be pulling a lot of deer as soon as the rut ends. So I do think that he's going to be coming down there some, whether it's in daylight or not, we're going to try to find out. But that's another tricky one because it's a 6 acre, maybe roughly 6 to 7 acre food plot. Maybe it's not quite that big, but trying to cover that from one tree stand location, you got to get super lucky if you're going to kill.
Tree?
Yeah.
Yeah, because even when you shot that buck down there in 2022, you kind of got
lucky.
That he ended up running all the
Yeah.
way down, because when he came out, he was chasing. Yeah, that's a long ways.
And the only way to hunt it differently is to pull a blind up in there. And then again, you're dealing with that whole challenge of trying to get out of there at the end of legal shooting
Yeah.
time. And there's lots of stuff we can talk about relative to your escape, how to get out. But let's focus again now then on, food in the evenings starting towards maybe the tail end of this coming week. But you can still catch them in the mornings in the bedding areas. And I think you can probably catch them in the early afternoons in the bedding areas too. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be focused on staying back in the timber.
Where you think he's bedding?
No, where I think the does might
I
be.
gotcha.
I think I know where
gotcha.
he's living. He's living kind of where he did last year in that one middle point.
Yeah.
Yep, and I'm not going to go in there, I don't think. And then I'm trying to fringe off on that side ridge where we made that small food plot when Ben Sweeney was there, that out on that point. Because that's easy to get into, and you can hunt it on any kind of a west, west, southwest, or northwest, and you can get back out of there without, running into a bunch of deer.
So you're still going to be focusing on the doe bedding for this coming week, and then
Yeah.
eventually probably food if you can
Yeah.
find a way to get in and out.
That's right.
Yeah.
You just don't like to spook any deer.
Right.
Sometimes you can get away with it if you're only hunting weekends and you kind of push it a little bit. But if you're going to try to hunt every day, you just got to be super careful and just kind of hopefully let time work for you.
And further, since the Bill Buck, had already kind of disappeared once and then it came back,
Yeah.
would you want to be a little extra sensitive to not giving him another reason to leave?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I want him to be here at least as long as possible.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get him late season if we don't get him, during the second half of the rut here.
Right.
But if he's not here, we can't get him.
Right.
So that's priority number one, is to hunt him as hard and as carefully as possible and keep him on the farm.
Gotcha.
I say the 22nd to the 28th. That's a really good time frame. So we'll kind of leave it at that. We'll bring you every day of action, but it might be a couple more days before I'm back in the tree. When are you gonna start hunting again, Jordan?
After you shoot the Bill Buck? No, probably like whenever it would make more sense to start hunting blinds again, food sources primarily.
Yeah.
Kind of like you were saying, because it's just way easier for me to get shots, predictable shots,
Yeah.
that way.
Plus, it's a lot warmer.
Yeah, I don't like being. That's the biggest issue there, is I don't want to be cold.
Yeah, and it's going to be cold this coming week.
That's just not.
No.
That's not for
I
me.
mean, you do it if you love it, but if you're not like ate up with it, it's a lot of.
I think that would take something that I enjoy and make it something that I dislike very quickly.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. All right, well, that's it for this week. We'll see you right back here again soon for the next episode of Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails. And remember to always
Dream big. I thought about throwing it back to you and saying dream and you saying big.
that would have been a twist.
Yeah.